The scout ship Vareth's eye drifted quietly at the edge of the star system, its sensors sweeping the small blue-green planet ahead. General Draxel Kor stood on the bridge, arms crossed, watching the feed with narrow eyes. The planet was called Haven's Rest by the humans who lived there. To the Skarn Empire, it was simply designation 7 Alpha, a soft target ripe for the taking. Draxel was not a patient man. He had spent 30 cycles climbing through the ranks of the Skarn military, crushing weaker species who dared to build colonies too close to Skarn space. Humans were new to him. He had heard stories from other commanders, some claiming humans fought with strange stubbornness, others saying humans were disorganized and easy to break. Draxel trusted numbers more than stories. And the numbers on his screen told him everything he needed to know. The colony below had a population of roughly 12,000. Sensor scans showed light defenses, a handful of aging turrets, a small orbital station with outdated shielding, and no visible warships in the system. The colony's buildings were simple, spread out across a wide valley near a river, with farmland stretching for kilometers in every direction. It looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, a young human settlement, far from any major fleet base, undefended and unaware of the danger approaching. "Report," Draxel said, not turning his head. His second-in-command, a wiry officer named Senek, stepped forward with a data pad. "Scans confirm minimal military presence, General. The colony's defense grid appears to be over a decade old. No signs of shield generators capable of resisting our bombardment ships. Population centers are lightly guarded. This will be a fast operation." Draxel allowed himself a small smile. Fast operations were good operations. The Skarn Empire needed new territory, new resources, and new labor. Human colonies, according to the reports gathered by Skarn spies over the past several years, were rich in minerals and had fertile land, perfect for expanding the Empire's reach into this quiet corner of the galaxy. Best of all, humanity's main military fleets were said to be busy elsewhere, spread thin across contested borders with other alien powers. This colony, Haven's Rest, was far from any of those fronts. It was isolated, quiet, and as far as Skarn intelligence could tell, completely alone. "Prepare the invasion fleet," Draxel ordered. "We land within the hour." Behind him, on the lower deck, hundreds of Skarn soldiers checked their weapons and armor. They were tall, gray-skinned warriors with sharp facial ridges and eyes that glowed faintly amber in dim light. They had conquered a dozen worlds before this one, each conquest adding to the Empire's growing collection of subject species. Most species surrendered quickly once their capital cities fell. The Skarn expected nothing different here. What none of them noticed, buried deep in the colony's communication logs, was a strange pattern. Every night at exactly the same hour, a burst of encrypted data left the colony and vanished into deep space, aimed at a point far beyond any charted human territory. Skarn intelligence had recorded this signal many times over the past few months, but dismissed it as routine colonial administration traffic, nothing more than reports being sent back to some distant human bureaucracy. They had no idea what that signal actually was, or where it was truly going. Down on the surface, inside a modest building near the center of the colony that served as the town hall, a woman named Elena Voss sat at a plain wooden desk, reading through the morning reports. She wore simple colonist clothing, the kind any farmer or shopkeeper might wear, but her eyes moved with the sharp focus of someone who had spent years reading battle reports instead of harvest numbers. A young man knocked on her door and stepped inside without waiting for an answer. His name was Marcus Ward, and though he wore the uniform of the colony's small civil defense force, his true rank was far higher than anyone in the colony had been told. "Ma'am," he said quietly, closing the door behind him, long-range sensors just picked up a gravity disturbance at the edge of the system. Big one, consistent with a fleet coming out of hyperspace. Elena set down her data pad and folded her hands on the desk. "How many ships?" "Preliminary count says 12. Could be more hiding behind the lead group. Signature matches known Skarn drive patterns." For a moment, Elena said nothing. She simply nodded, slow and steady, as if she had been expecting this news for a long time because she had. "Send the signal," she said finally. "Tell them the guests have arrived." Marcus's face didn't change, but something in his posture straightened, the way a soldier's does when an order finally comes after a long wait. "Understood. And the colonists? Keep the routine exactly as planned. No panic, no unusual movement. Everyone follows their normal schedule until the moment the ships enter atmosphere. Then we begin phase 2. Marcus left without another word. Elena stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the quiet town square, where a group of children were kicking a ball between two makeshift goalposts, laughing in the morning sun. She watched them for a long moment before her expression hardened into something colder, something far more calculating than a simple colony administrator should have worn. Haven's Rest was not what it appeared to be. Yes, 12,000 people lived here. Yes, they farmed the land and traded goods and raised their children exactly as any other colony would. But underneath that ordinary life ran something else entirely. A plan built by the highest levels of human military command. A plan that had taken 3 years to prepare. And a plan that depended entirely on an enemy believing this colony was weak, undefended, and alone. It was not alone. It had never been alone. High above the planet, hidden within the asteroid belt at the edge of the system, cloaked beneath layers of sensor-jamming technology far more advanced than anything the Skarn Empire had ever encountered, an entire human battle fleet waited in silence. 42 warships, crewed by 20,000 of humanity's most experienced soldiers and pilots, sat completely still, engines cold, running on minimal power to avoid detection. They had been waiting there for 6 weeks, watching, listening, preparing for exactly this moment. Admiral Thomas Reyes, commander of the Hidden Fleet, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Retribution, watching the same sensor feed that Draxil Core was watching from the other side of the system, except Reyes saw something Draxil could not. He saw the full picture. He saw not 12 aging turrets and a handful of guards, but a colony wired with hidden sensor arrays, staffed by soldiers disguised as farmers, and protected by defense systems buried far beneath the visible surface. Systems that had been switched off and hidden from every scan the Skarn scouts had performed over the past year. "They're taking the bait," Reyes said quietly to his tactical officer. "Looks that way, sir." 12 capital ships confirmed, could be as many as 18 with escorts. That's a significant chunk of their border fleet. Reyes nodded slowly. This was exactly the kind of force they had hoped to draw out, not a small raiding party, but a real invasion fleet, one with enough firepower and enough soldiers that its destruction would send a message the entire Skarn Empire could not ignore. Humanity had learned, through hard experience in its early conflicts with alien powers, that showing weakness only invited more aggression. So instead, they had built something different, a trap designed to look exactly like weakness, wrapped around a core of overwhelming strength. "All ships maintain silent running," Reyes ordered. "Let them land, let them think they've won. We move only when the signal comes from the surface." Back on Haven's Rest, the Skarn invasion fleet began its descent through the atmosphere. Senec watched the display with satisfaction as the 12 troop transports broke formation, spreading out to land near key points around the colony, the town hall, the small spaceport, the water treatment plant, and the farmland to the north where most of the colony's food was grown. Standard doctrine. Seize the critical infrastructure first, then move to secure the population. Draxil watched from the bridge of his flagship, still in high orbit, content to let his ground forces handle what looked like an easy operation. He had learned long ago that a good commander did not need to personally walk into every battle. He would come down once the colony was secured, to stand before the human leaders and accept their surrender in person. It was a tradition among Skarn officers, a moment of pride they rarely gave up. The first transport touched down in the town square, kicking up dust and scattering the children who had been playing there moments before. But the children did not run in panic. They walked, calmly and quickly, toward the nearest buildings, following a drill they had clearly practiced many times, disappearing through doors that closed and locked behind them without a sound. Draxel noticed this on his screen and frowned slightly. Senec, enhance that footage. The way those younglings moved, that wasn't panic, that looked practiced. Senec studied the replay for a moment before shrugging. Perhaps their teachers drilled them for emergencies, General. Human younglings are known to follow instructions when frightened. Draxel said nothing, but the frown did not leave his face. It was a small thing, barely worth mentioning, and yet something about it did not sit right with him. He had conquered enough worlds to know the difference between fear and discipline, and what he had just seen looked far more like discipline. On the ground, the first wave of Skarn's soldiers marched into the town square, weapons raised, expecting to find frightened civilians begging for mercy. Instead, they found the square nearly empty, the buildings quiet, doors closed, windows dark. A soft breeze moved through the open space, carrying the smell of dust and distant farmland, but no voices, no crying, no sounds of surrender. The lead soldier, a hardened veteran named Tarek, raised a hand to halt his squad. He scanned the empty square with growing unease. In every previous invasion he had taken part in, civilians reacted the same way, screaming, running, hiding in obvious places, begging when found. This silence, this calm, organized emptiness, felt wrong in a way he could not quite explain. "Command," Tarek said into his comm unit, "town square is clear. No resistance but also no civilians in sight, requesting instructions." Senec's voice crackled back through the comm. "Proceed to the town hall. Locate colony leadership. Report any unusual activity immediately." Tarek signaled his squad forward, weapons still raised, moving through streets that felt far too quiet for a colony of 12,000 people. Somewhere above them, hidden behind a curtain of dust and cloud cover carefully engineered by colony weather control systems that no Skarn scan had ever detected, 6 small satellites shifted their orbits slightly, aiming their sensors down at the invading soldiers with mathematical precision, recording every movement, every weapon, every face. Inside the town hall, Elena Voss sat calmly behind her desk as the sound of heavy boots echoed up the front steps. She did not reach for a weapon. She did not call for help. She simply folded her hands, took a slow breath, and waited for the door to open, already knowing exactly how the next few hours would unfold, because she had planned every single moment of it herself. The door burst open and Tarek stepped inside, weapon aimed directly at her chest. "Human," he said in halting, mechanically translated common speech, "you will surrender this colony now." Elena looked up at him with an expression that held no fear at all, only a strange, quiet calm that made the veteran soldier hesitate for the first time in his long career. "Of course," she said softly. "Welcome to Haven's Rest. We've been expecting you." Tarek stared at the woman behind the desk for a long moment, his weapon still raised, unsure what to make of her words. "We've been expecting you." No frightened human had ever said such a thing to him before. He had heard begging, crying, angry shouting, even silence born of pure terror. He had never heard calm welcome. "Explain yourself," he said through his translator, voice flat and suspicious. Elena rose slowly from her chair, hands visible and empty, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who had rehearsed this exact moment many times. "I am the administrator of this colony. My name is Elena Voss. If you wish to discuss terms of surrender, I am ready to speak with your commanding officer." Tarek studied her face, searching for the fear he expected to find there, but found none. He signaled 2 of his soldiers to search the building while he kept his weapon trained on her. "You will come with us," he said. "Command wishes to speak with colony leadership directly." "Of course," Elena said again, stepping around her desk without resistance. "Lead the way." As she was marched out of the town hall and down the front steps, Elena took careful note of everything around her: the number of soldiers in the square, their formation, their weapons, the positions of their transport ships. She had trained for years to memorize such details in a single glance, and every piece of information she gathered now would matter later, when the true battle began. Word of the peaceful surrender spread quickly through the Skarn command channels, and within the hour, General Draxel Core himself decided to descend to the surface. He arrived aboard a heavily escorted shuttle, landing in the town square with an honor guard of 20 elite soldiers marching before him. Draxel stepped out into the open air of Haven's Rest for the first time, breathing in the unfamiliar scent of human farmland, and looked around at the quiet, orderly colony with something between satisfaction and unease. He had expected chaos. He had expected fires, screaming, resistance fighters hiding in the buildings, perhaps even a few brave fools trying to defend their homes with farm equipment turned into makeshift weapons. Instead, he found calm streets, closed doors, and a human woman waiting for him near the town hall steps, flanked by his own soldiers, looking for all the world like she was greeting an old business partner rather than a conquering general. "You are the leader of this colony?" Draxel asked, his translator rendering his deep, growling voice into passable common speech. "I am," Elena replied. "Elena Voss, colony administrator, and you are General Draxel Core, commander of the Skarn invasion fleet." Draxel's eyes narrowed sharply. "You know my name." "We make it our business to know who visits us," Elena said simply, no hint of fear or challenge in her tone. Draxel studied her for a long moment, his sharp facial ridges tightening the way they did whenever something troubled him. Humans, according to every report he had read, were supposed to be emotional, unpredictable creatures, prone to panic under pressure. This woman displayed none of those traits. She stood calm and composed before the general of an invading army, speaking to him as though they were equals discussing routine matters of trade. "Your colony has no chance of resisting my forces," Draxel said, testing her, watching for any crack in her composure. "Surrender now, and your people will be treated as productive subjects of the Skarn Empire. Resist, and you will be treated as enemies of the Empire, along with everything that word implies." "We understand," Elena said. "Haven's Rest surrenders. We ask only that you allow our people to continue their daily lives without unnecessary harm, while the details of this transition are worked out." Draxel almost laughed. It was, without question, the smoothest, most complete surrender he had ever received in 30 cycles of conquest, and yet something about its very smoothness bothered him deeply, though he could not name exactly why. He decided to press further. "I will require access to your colony's full administrative records," he said. "Population registers, resource inventories, communication logs. Full cooperation, or the terms of this surrender will change." "Of course," Elena said, gesturing toward the town hall behind her. "Everything you require is inside. I will personally guide your officers through our systems." Over the following hours, Skarn officers moved through Haven's Rest, cataloging buildings, counting supplies, reviewing records that Elena's staff provided without hesitation or complaint. Everything matched the reports Skarn intelligence had gathered before the invasion: population numbers, farming outputs, basic infrastructure. Nothing seemed out of place, and that more than anything else was exactly what troubled Senec as he reviewed the data late into the evening. "General," Senec said, finding Draxel standing alone on a small hill overlooking the colony, watching the sun set behind distant mountains, "the records check out completely. Population matches our estimates almost exactly. Resource stockpiles match projected agricultural output. There is nothing unusual here." "That is precisely what troubles me," Draxel said quietly, still watching the horizon. "In 30 cycles of conquest, Senec, I have never taken a colony this easily. Not once. Even the weakest species fight back in some way: sabotage, hidden weapons, desperate last stands. This colony did nothing. It simply opened its doors and handed us everything we asked for." "Perhaps humans truly are as disorganized as some reports claim," Senec offered. "Perhaps this colony's leadership simply values survival over pride." Draxel said nothing for a long moment, his amber eyes narrowing further as he studied the peaceful farmland stretching out before him. Something about the shape of it nagged at his instincts. The too-perfect grid of the fields, the positioning of the buildings, even the placement of that small hill he now stood upon. which offered an unusually clear view of the entire colony and the surrounding valley, almost as if it had been left there deliberately for exactly this purpose. Down in the colony, deep beneath the town hall, Elena Voss descended a hidden staircase that led to a bunker most Skarn scans had never detected, buried too deep and too well shielded for their sensors to penetrate. Inside, Marcus Ward and a team of a dozen soldiers monitored a bank of screens showing every corner of the colony above, along with live feeds from the hidden orbital fleet still waiting in the asteroid belt. "Talk to me," Elena said, stepping into the room. "Invasion force has fully committed," Marcus reported. "All 12 capital ships in orbit, troop numbers on the ground matching our projections almost exactly. General Kor himself came down to personally accept the surrender, which is better than we hoped for. If we can keep him on the surface a little longer, we cut off the head of their command structure the moment things go loud." "And Admiral Reyes?" "Standing by. Fleet remains hidden and silent. He's waiting on your signal." Elena studied the screens carefully, watching Skarn soldiers move through the streets of her colony, searching buildings, questioning the handful of colonists who had been allowed to remain visible above ground as part of the deception. Every one of those colonists, she knew, had been thoroughly trained for exactly this scenario: calm cooperation, believable fear where needed, and absolutely no information that would give away the truth of what waited beneath their feet. "How long can we keep the ruse going?" she asked. "Depends how thorough they get," Marcus said. "So far they're following standard occupation protocol, securing infrastructure, cataloging resources, establishing a base of operations. If they follow the pattern from their previous conquests, they'll spend another day or two consolidating control before moving colonists into labor assignments. That gives us a window." "Good," Elena said. "We wait, let them settle in. Let them believe they've won completely, before we show them how wrong they are." Above ground, as night fell over Haven's Rest, General Draxel Kor retired to a requisitioned building near the town square that had once served as the colony's small medical clinic. He sat alone at a desk cleared of human medical equipment, reviewing the day's reports by the dim light of a portable lamp, his mind still troubled by the strange calm of this conquest. A knock came at the door, and Senec entered, carrying a data pad with a fresh report. "General, our scans have picked up something unusual. Deep ground sensors are detecting structures beneath the town hall that don't match the humans' official building records. Something large, heavily shielded, extending at least 40 meters below the surface." Draxel sat up straighter, his amber eyes sharpening with sudden focus. "Show me." Senec placed the data pad on the desk, displaying a rough sensor image, distorted by heavy shielding but unmistakably showing the outline of large chambers and tunnels running beneath the colony's central buildings. "It's not conclusive, General. The shielding is too thick for a clear reading, but it's definitely not standard colonial infrastructure. This is something far more substantial." Draxel stared at the image for a long time, his instincts, honed over 30 cycles of warfare, screaming at him that something was deeply wrong with this conquest. The too easy surrender, the disciplined children, the strange calm of the administrator. And now this, a massive hidden structure buried beneath a colony that was supposed to be nothing more than a simple farming settlement. "Increase security around the town hall immediately," Draxel ordered. "Double the guard on the human administrator. I want full sensor sweeps of this entire colony by morning, every building, every field, every structure. If there is something hidden here, I intend to find it before it finds us." Senec nodded and hurried out to relay the orders, leaving Draxel alone with his thoughts and the glowing image of hidden chambers on the data pad before him. Outside, the quiet streets of Haven's Rest lay still under the darkening sky. Thousands of Skarn soldiers settling into their newly conquered territory, completely unaware that far beneath their boots, and far beyond the edge of their sensor range, the true masters of this trap were simply waiting, patient and unseen, for the perfect moment to close the jaws around them. By morning, Draxel's suspicions had only grown stronger. His engineers had spent the night running deep sensor sweeps across the entire colony, and the results sat before him now on a large display in the requisitioned clinic, painting a picture that made the muscles along his jaw tighten with growing anger. The hidden structure beneath the town hall was far larger than the first scan had suggested. It extended not just beneath the central buildings, but out under the farmland to the north, connecting to smaller structures hidden below what should have been simple grain silos. Similar readings had come back from the water treatment plant and the small spaceport, both showing signs of shielded chambers far too sophisticated for a young farming colony to have built on its own. "This is not colonial infrastructure," said Vrenna, the fleet's chief engineer, standing beside the display with her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "The shielding alone would require technology well beyond what this species is supposed to possess. Whatever is down there, General, it was built with military-grade materials and military-grade planning." Draxel said nothing for a long moment, staring at the glowing outline of tunnels and chambers spreading beneath his feet like the roots of some enormous hidden tree. "Get me the administrator," he finally said. "Now." Elena Voss was brought to him within minutes, still calm, still composed, offering no resistance as she was marched into the clinic and seated across the desk from the general. Draxel turned the display toward her, letting her see the full extent of what his engineers had found. "Explain this," he said, voice low and dangerous. Elena studied the image for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Emergency shelters," she said simply. "Built when the colony was first established, in case of natural disasters or attacks from hostile species. Standard precaution for frontier settlements." "Do not insult my intelligence," Draxel growled, leaning forward across the desk. "I have seen frontier settlements human. I have conquered a dozen worlds less developed than this one. None of them possessed shielding capable of blocking Skarn sensors this effectively. This technology is beyond your colony's official capabilities." Elena met his gaze steadily, and for just a moment, something shifted behind her eyes, not fear, but a kind of quiet, dangerous patience that made even the hardened general feel a brief flicker of unease. "General Kor," she said calmly, "I would advise you to consider carefully what you do next." Draxel slammed his fist on the desk, the sound echoing sharply through the small room. "You will open those chambers immediately, or I will have my soldiers tear this colony apart building by building until we find the entrance ourselves." "That would be a mistake," Elena said, her voice never rising, never wavering. "A mistake," Draxel's amber eyes blazed with fury. "You have 12,000 civilians under my control, human. One word from me and this entire colony burns. Do not speak to me of mistakes." For the first time since the invasion began, Elena Voss allowed herself the faintest, coldest smile. "General, I don't believe you fully understand the situation you're in. This colony was never your target, it was your trap." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Draxel stared at her, his mind racing through everything that had happened since his fleet arrived in this system. The disciplined children, the too-perfect surrender, the strange calm that had unsettled him from the very first moment his soldiers landed in the town square. Every piece of the puzzle suddenly clicked into place with horrifying clarity. "Senec," Draxel barked into his comm unit. "Status of the fleet immediately." There was a pause, longer than it should have been, before Senec's voice crackled back through the comm, tight with barely controlled alarm. "General, we're picking up massive gravity disturbances at the edge of the system. Multiple large signatures, emerging from what appears to be sensor-jammed positions within the asteroid belt. General, I count over 40 capital ship signatures." Draxel felt something cold settle in his stomach, an emotion he had not experienced in 30 cycles of unbroken conquest. Fear. "All ships' emergency protocols," he snapped. "Prepare for immediate withdrawal." "General," Senec cut in, voice rising with urgency, "the human fleet has already begun moving to intercept our orbital ships. They're too fast, they knew our positions before we detected them, they've cut off our escape routes to the system's edge." Elena watched Draxel's composure crack for the first time. a grim satisfaction settling over her features as she rose slowly from her chair. Two Skarn guards moved to restrain her, but she simply held up her hands, unresisting, waiting. "You planned this," Draxel said, his voice quiet now, almost disbelieving. "All of it, the weak defenses, the easy surrender, everything we saw was designed to draw us in." "Yes," Alina said simply. "Haven's Rest was built 3 years ago for exactly this purpose. Every colonist here is either military personnel or a trained volunteer who understood the risk when they signed on for this mission. The farmland, the buildings, the population records, all real, all carefully maintained to withstand exactly the kind of scrutiny your intelligence services applied before authorizing this invasion. You didn't find a weak, undefended colony, General. You found precisely what we wanted you to find." Draxel's mind raced, trying to calculate a way out of the trap closing around him, but every path led back to the same grim conclusion. His fleet was scattered across the system, troops spread thin across the colony's surface, orbital ships caught in low orbit with a numerically superior human fleet bearing down on them from the asteroid belt. He had walked directly into a killing ground of his own choosing, confident and unsuspecting, exactly as the humans had planned. Beneath the town hall, in the hidden command bunker, Marcus Ward watched the tactical display with fierce focus as Admiral Reyes' fleet surged out from behind the asteroid belt, 42 warships moving in perfect coordinated formation toward the 12 Skarn capital ships still holding position in orbit. "Fleet is moving," he reported to Alina through his earpiece. "Admiral Reyes says the trap is closing. He wants confirmation to begin Phase 2 on the ground." "Confirmed," Alina said quietly, watching Draxel's guards shift uneasily as alarms began sounding through the colony above. "Begin Phase 2. Wake up the colony's real defenders." Across Haven's Rest, hidden panels beneath ordinary-looking buildings slid open silently, revealing armed and armored human soldiers who had spent the entire occupation disguised among the colonists, playing the roles of frightened civilians, farmers, and shopkeepers. Weapons that had been carefully hidden away, indistinguishable from farming equipment or storage crates, were retrieved and activated within seconds. The quiet farming town that Draxel's soldiers had marched through so confidently the day before was, in truth, a fortress filled with trained soldiers waiting patiently for exactly this moment. Tarek, the veteran soldier who had first entered the town hall the day before, found himself suddenly surrounded as 3 colonists he had passed dozens of times over the past day: a farmer, a shopkeeper, and a young mother he had seen walking through the square, turned toward him and his squad with weapons raised, their friendly, harmless expressions replaced by cold, professional focus. "Drop your weapons," the farmer said in perfect, unaccented common speech, no translator device needed at all. "This colony belongs to humanity. It always has." Tarek hesitated only a moment before realizing the trap had already closed around him completely. His squad was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and caught completely off guard by soldiers who had walked among them for a full day without revealing themselves. Slowly, one by one, his soldiers lowered their weapons. Back in the clinic, Draxel listened to the chaos erupting across his comm channels. Reports of colonists revealing hidden weapons, soldiers being surrounded and disarmed throughout the colony, orbital ships scrambling desperately to organize a defense against the overwhelming human fleet now bearing down on them from multiple directions. Everything he had built his conquest upon in the past day was crumbling apart in a matter of minutes. "You could have simply attacked us the moment we landed," Draxel said to Alina, a strange mixture of anger and grudging respect in his voice. "Why the elaborate deception? Why let us believe we had won?" Alina studied him for a long moment before answering. "Because destroying 12 ships that stumbled onto an ambush teaches your empire nothing, General, but destroying an entire invasion fleet that believed, with absolute confidence, that it had conquered a helpless human colony, that teaches a lesson your empire will never forget. We didn't just want to defeat you, General Kor. We wanted every commander in the Skarn Empire to understand exactly what happens when they underestimate humanity." Outside, the sky above Haven's Rest had begun to fill with the bright flashes of distant orbital combat, streaks of light and fire marking where the human fleet had begun its assault on the trapped Skarn ships. Draxel closed his eyes briefly, the weight of his failure settling over him like a physical burden, and understood, with cold and total clarity, that he had led his forces into the single greatest disaster of his 30-cycle career. Admiral Thomas Reyes stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the battle unfold across the main display with the calm focus of a man who had spent months preparing for this exact moment. His 42 ships moved with practiced precision, closing the distance to the 12 trapped Skarn capital ships in a wide, sweeping formation designed to cut off every possible escape route. Enemy ships attempting to break formation and retreat toward the system's edge, his tactical officer reported. "They're moving too slow, sir. We'll have firing solutions within 90 seconds. "Let them run," Reyes said calmly. "Cruiser Squadron 2 cut off their retreat vector. Squadron 3 target their engines first. I want them trapped, not destroyed, until we've confirmed General Corps' status on the surface." The Skarn fleet, caught completely off guard by the sudden appearance of an enemy force nearly 4 times its size, scrambled into a defensive formation, but the damage from the surprise had already been done. Ships that should have had hours to prepare defensive maneuvers instead had mere minutes, their crews thrown into chaos by alarms blaring through corridors where soldiers had grown comfortable in what they believed was a completed conquest. The first exchange of weapons fire lit up the space above Haven's Rest like a violent sunrise. Human warships, built with technology the Skarn Empire had never encountered before, tore through enemy shields with devastating precision. The lead Skarn capital ship, the Vareth's Eye itself, took 3 direct hits along its port side within the first minute of combat, sending debris and atmosphere venting out into the vacuum of space. Aboard the Vareth's Eye, Senec gripped the edge of his command console as the ship shuddered violently under the assault. Shields at 60% and falling. "They're targeting our engines specifically. They want to disable us, not destroy us." "Return fire, all batteries," the ship's captain shouted. But even as the order was given, everyone on the bridge could see the grim mathematics of the battle playing out before them. 12 ships against 42, caught in low orbit with no warning and no time to organize a coordinated defense, faced odds that no amount of skill or courage could overcome. Down on the surface, chaos had engulfed the Skarn ground forces as colonists throughout Haven's Rest revealed themselves as trained soldiers, moving with brutal efficiency to secure key positions and disarm the scattered, disorganized invaders. What had been, only hours before, a peaceful farming town was now a battlefield where every building, every alleyway, and every field hid armed defenders who knew the terrain far better than the soldiers who had marched through it so confidently the day before. Tarek, now disarmed and held at gunpoint by the farmer who had revealed himself as a trained human soldier, watched the sky above through a nearby window as flashes of light marked the destruction of ship after ship in orbit. "You planned all of this," he said quietly, more to himself than to his captors. "The whole colony, every person in it." "Every person who volunteered for it," the farmer replied, his weapon steady and unwavering. "Nobody here was forced into anything. We knew exactly what we were signing up for when we agreed to build this place." In the clinic that had become his temporary headquarters, General Draxel Corps listened to the reports flooding in from every direction, each one worse than the last. Ground forces reporting capture or surrender across the colony. Orbital ships taking heavy damage, their crews fighting desperately against a superior enemy force. His entire invasion, launched with such confidence only a day before, was collapsing into complete disaster. "General," Senec's voice came through the comm, strained and urgent, "the Vareth's Eye has lost primary engines. We cannot retreat, requesting immediate orders." Draxel closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of his decision pressing down on him with crushing force. Every instinct honed over 30 cycles of warfare told him that continuing to fight was pointless, that his forces were beaten before the battle had truly even begun. But the pride of a Skarn general, The deep cultural belief that surrender was a shame no warrior should ever accept, fought fiercely against that cold, rational conclusion. "Hold position," Draxel said finally, his voice heavy. "Continue defensive fire, do not surrender the ship." Elena Voss, still seated across from him under guard, watched the general's face carefully as he issued the order, seeing the internal conflict playing out clearly across his sharp, gray features. "More of your people will die for nothing, General," she said quietly. "This battle was decided before your fleet ever entered this system. Continuing to fight only adds to the cost." "You expect me to simply surrender?" Draxel snapped, turning his amber eyes toward her with fresh anger. "To hand over my ships, my soldiers, my honor without a fight?" "I expect you to consider what kind of leader values pride over the lives of the people who trust him," Elena replied, her voice calm but firm. "You have already lost this battle, General. The only question left is how many more of your soldiers you're willing to sacrifice before you accept that fact." Above the planet, the battle continued to rage, but the outcome had become increasingly clear with every passing minute. Of the 12 Skarn capital ships, 4 had already been destroyed outright, their wreckage scattering into slowly expanding debris fields. 3 more had lost primary engines and drifted helplessly, unable to maneuver, their weapons systems the only thing keeping them from immediate capture. The remaining 5 ships fought on desperately, but the coordinated, overwhelming force of Admiral Reyes' fleet gave them little room to maneuver or hope. "Sir," Reyes' tactical officer reported, "enemy flagship Vareth's Eye has lost engines and is venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. Their weapons are still active, but their combat effectiveness is dropping fast." "Continue targeted fire," Reyes ordered. "Disable, don't destroy wherever possible. We want prisoners, not just wreckage." Every captured ship and soldier is more information about the Skarn Empire's capabilities, and more leverage for whatever comes next. Within the Vareth's Eye, Senec watched helplessly as system after system failed around him, the ship's once-proud bridge now filled with smoke and the harsh red glow of emergency lighting. "General," he called out over the comm to Draxel on the surface, his voice barely steady, "we cannot hold much longer. Half our weapons systems are offline. If they target our reactor core directly, we won't survive the next volley." On the surface, Draxel stood in silence for a long moment, staring at nothing in particular, the sounds of his crumbling empire's ambitions echoing through every comm channel connected to his headset. He thought of the soldiers under his command, men and women who had followed him loyally through a dozen conquests, now facing death in the twisted wreckage of ships they had believed would carry them to easy victory. He thought of his own 30 cycles of unbroken success, now ending in the most complete and humiliating defeat he could have ever imagined. And finally, he thought of the strange, calm certainty in Elena Voss's eyes when she had told him this colony was never truly weak at all. "All ships," Draxel said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision, "cease fire. Signal surrender to the human fleet." The words hung in the air of the small clinic like a physical presence, and for a moment, nobody moved. Then Elena nodded slowly, reaching for the comm device on the desk beside her. "Admiral Reyes," she said, her voice steady and clear, "General Corps has ordered a full surrender of Skarn forces. Please confirm cessation of hostilities." Aboard the Retribution, high above the battered remains of the Skarn fleet, Admiral Reyes allowed himself a small, satisfied smile as the reports of surrender began flooding in from ship after ship across the battlefield. "All units hold fire," he ordered. "Begin securing enemy vessels. Well done, everyone. Let's bring this fleet home." Across Haven's Rest, the sounds of battle slowly faded into an uneasy quiet, replaced by the methodical work of human soldiers securing Skarn prisoners, tending to the wounded on both sides, and beginning the long process of accounting for everything that had happened over the past 2 days. What had begun as a confident invasion by a powerful alien empire had ended, just as Elena Voss and Admiral Reyes had planned from the very beginning, in the complete and total destruction of the invading forces' ambitions. But as the sun set once more over the quiet farmland of Haven's Rest, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red above the drifting wreckage of 12 Skarn warships, both Alina and Reyes understood that this victory, however decisive, was only the opening move in a much longer game still waiting to be played. 3 days after the battle ended, General Draxel Kor stood in a small holding room aboard the Retribution, stripped of his rank insignia but treated, much to his surprise, with a strange kind of respect he had not expected from his captors. Admiral Reyes entered the room alone, carrying a data pad, and gestured for Draxel to sit at the small table between them. "You could have simply executed me," Draxel said, watching Reyes carefully as he took his own seat. "Or your soldiers, at least. It would have been the simplest solution." "It would have," Reyes agreed. "But simple isn't always smart. Dead prisoners can't carry a message back to their empire, General. Living ones can." Draxel's amber eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You intend to release me?" "You and most of your surviving crew," Reyes said, sliding the data pad across the table. "Under specific conditions. We'll be returning your remaining ships, minus their weapons systems, along with every soldier who wishes to leave. You'll be given safe passage back to Skarn territory." "Why?" Draxel asked, genuinely baffled by the offer. In 30 cycles of warfare, he had never once heard of a victorious force releasing captured ships and soldiers back to the enemy without extracting significant concessions first. Reyes leaned back in his chair, studying the alien general with an expression that mixed calculation and something almost like understanding. "Because we don't want a prolonged war with your empire, General Kor. We want your empire to understand something very specific, and we think you're the right person to carry that message home." "And what message is that?" "That humanity is not weak," Reyes said simply. "That we are not an easy target, not a scattered collection of undefended colonies waiting to be conquered. Your intelligence services made an assumption about us, General, and that assumption cost you an entire invasion fleet. We'd prefer your empire learn that lesson now, from a defeat that cost lives but not everything, rather than later, in a full-scale war that would cost far more." Draxel sat in silence for a long moment, considering the Admiral's words carefully. He thought of the battle above Haven's Rest, of the colony that had appeared so weak and had proven to be anything but, of the calm, calculating woman who had orchestrated the entire deception with patience and precision that rivaled the best Skarn military planners he had ever known. He thought, too, of his own soldiers, waiting anxiously to learn their fate, many of whom had families back in Skarn territory who deserved to see them again. "You could have destroyed us completely," Draxel said finally. "Why show mercy to an enemy that invaded your territory without provocation?" "Because mercy, when properly understood, is its own kind of strength," Reyes replied. "Total destruction breeds only hatred and a desire for revenge, General. A defeated enemy who is treated with some measure of respect, who is allowed to return home and share what they've learned, has a chance to become something other than an enemy in the future. We're not interested in endless war with your empire. We're interested in your empire understanding, clearly and permanently, that provoking humanity carries a price far higher than any potential reward." 2 days later, Draxel stood on the bridge of his own battered flagship, the Vareth's Eye, now stripped of its weapons, but otherwise repaired enough for the long journey home. Human engineers had worked alongside Skarn crew members to restore the ship's engines, an experience that left many of his soldiers deeply confused about the nature of an enemy who would help repair the very ship that had invaded their territory only days before. Alina Voss stood on the landing platform below, watching as the last of the Skarn soldiers boarded their transport shuttles for the journey back to their ships. Draxel descended the ramp to speak with her one final time before departure, his expression a complex mixture of respect, resentment, and grudging understanding. "I underestimated you," he said simply. "All of you. This colony, this fleet, this entire operation. It was the most complete deception I have ever encountered in 30 cycles of warfare." "You're not the first commander to underestimate humanity, General," Alina replied. And you likely won't be the last, but I hope you'll be one of the few who learns from the experience rather than simply seeking revenge for it. Draxel considered her words carefully before responding. The Skarn Empire does not easily forget defeat, Administrator Voss. There will be those among my people who demand retaliation for what happened here. Perhaps, Alina said, but there will also be those who understand that humanity, when properly provoked, is capable of far more than any intelligence report suggested. We're not interested in conquering your empire, General. We're interested in being left alone to build our colonies in peace. This entire operation existed to send that message clearly, in a way that words alone never could. Draxel nodded slowly, understanding settling over him like a weight he would carry for the rest of his career. I will carry your message back to the Empire, Administrator. Whether they choose to listen is beyond my control. As the Skarn ships departed the system one by one, their damaged hulls limping slowly back toward the edge of known space, Admiral Reyes stood beside Alina Voss on the same small hill where Draxel had once stood, watching the same peaceful farmland stretch out toward the horizon. Do you think it worked? Reyes asked quietly. Do you think they'll actually learn something from this, or will they simply come back with a bigger fleet next time? Alina considered the question for a long moment before answering. I think General Kor will remember exactly what happened here for the rest of his life. Whether his empire as a whole learns anything depends on factors far beyond our control. But we've bought ourselves time, Admiral. Time to build more colonies like this one. Time to prepare for whatever comes next. Far across the galaxy, weeks later, General Draxel Kor stood before the ruling council of the Skarn Empire, delivering his report on the disaster at Haven's Rest. The council chamber fell silent as he described the deception in careful detail. The false weakness, the hidden fleet, the disguised soldiers, the complete and total collapse of an invasion force that had believed itself facing nothing more than a helpless farming colony. This was not a fluke, this was not luck, Draxel told the assembled council members, his voice carrying the weight of hard experience. This was a carefully planned operation, executed with patience and precision that rivals our own best military strategists. Humanity is not the disorganized, scattered species our intelligence reports suggested. They are capable of extraordinary deception, extraordinary discipline, and extraordinary strength when they choose to use it. One of the council elders, a scarred veteran named Karthus who had led dozens of successful campaigns throughout his long career, studied Draxel carefully before speaking. You suggest we abandon our expansion into human territory entirely. I suggest, Draxel said carefully, that we proceed with far greater caution than we have shown until now. This species does not fight the way we expect them to fight. They do not think the way we expect them to think. Any future engagement with humanity must account for the very real possibility that what we see on the surface is not the whole truth of what lies beneath. The council chamber fell into contemplative silence, each member considering the implications of Draxel's report. Word of the disaster at Haven's Rest would spread throughout Skarn territory in the following weeks, carried by soldiers who had witnessed the deception firsthand, shared in hushed conversations among officers who had once viewed humanity as an easy target ripe for conquest. And far away, on the quiet farming colony that had started it all, life slowly returned to something resembling normal. The children who had once practiced calm, disciplined drills in the town square now played freely once more, unaware of just how close their peaceful home had come to becoming a permanent battlefield, or how carefully every moment of the invasion had been planned by the adults around them. The hidden bunkers beneath the town hall returned to silent readiness, waiting patiently for whatever threat might come next, while above them, Haven's Rest continued its quiet existence as exactly what it appeared to be on the surface, and exactly what it truly was, hidden far beneath. Admiral Reyes' fleet eventually withdrew back into the shadows of the asteroid belt, resuming its silent vigil, ready to answer the call again should another empire make the same fatal mistake of underestimating the quiet, unassuming colonies scattered across humanity's expanding frontier. Elena Voss returned to her desk in the town hall, resuming her role as colony administrator, reading through routine reports as though nothing unusual had happened at all. But everyone who had lived through those 2 extraordinary days understood something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. That appearances could be carefully, deliberately deceiving, that true strength often hid behind a mask of vulnerability, and that any enemy who dared to invade a human colony believing it weak and undefended might very well discover, too late, that they had walked directly into a carefully prepared trap of humanity's own design. The stars above Haven's Rest continued their slow, silent turning, indifferent to the battle that had raged briefly in the space above the colony, indifferent to the empires and ambitions that rose and fell across the vast darkness of the galaxy. But somewhere out among those stars, word of what had happened here was already spreading, carried by frightened soldiers and cautious commanders alike. A quiet warning whispered from one alien empire to the next. Humanity was not what it appeared to be, and those who forgot that simple truth did so at their own tremendous peril.